Hey, it's me with another budget deck video, and two interesting things about this deck. First, I kind of wanted to make a deck profile on Shaddoll, and someone has also asked in the comments if I could make one, and my first thought was maybe some kind of control pure Shaddoll variant, but it's basically impossible to do Shaddolls on a budget because like their main boss monsters are all ultra rares, and you kind of want to run multiple of them. So yeah, I felt like that wasn't really possible. So I felt like, what's the next best kind of thing? Something to be splashed into Shaddolls, because Shaddolls, well, they work very well with any kind of attribute deck, especially if they have stuff that they want to maybe be doing in the graveyard with the effects. So yeah, didn't want to do light deck because also ultra rares, didn't want to do dark deck because Winda is an ultra rare. So I thought, okay, fire decks or earth decks, and there's one deck that fit the criteria with the earth decks very, very, very well. Also did a crawler Shaddoll deck profile. If you want to see that, let me know. It's not up to my standards, so I'm not sure if I want to do it, but if anyone's interested, just let me know. The second point is, what I like about mixing it with Infinitrack, this deck actually has a lot of potential on its own. First of all, as a budget deck, but also as like a deck that you can add more cards to once you get that far. And Infinitracks aren't actually that bad of a deck in general if you put the right cards in it, mix it with like Machina, whatever you want to call it, or other machine earth good stuff. The deck can be quite competent in the right hands. So I felt like having two different decks in here, which you want cards basically of both archetypes, because you can do stuff with them on their own, but you can also heavily upgrade either of the two decks, whatever you decide you want to do. So that was two things about the deck that I really enjoyed. Starting off with one of the playmakers, Infinitrack Harvester. It's a great card to search out. Which you mainly want to be searching out is a Brutal Dozer. There's sometimes situations where you maybe want to go for something else, but that is your main play starter for the more controlled kind of variant that this deck is meant to be, because then you get the Brutal Dozer, and then you can go into like your rank 5, which with spamming Goliath, this card itself doesn't really do much, but you can basically summon it any kind of times a turn. So you get a lot of machine monsters in the graveyard, and this card can banish itself, then shuffle 5 machine earth monsters back into your deck and draw 2 cards, which is really, 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 really neat, especially in a control-based deck. Helps you dig for your Shaddoll cards, especially for your Shaddoll Fusion. Helps you dig for your trap cards, your power spells, and so on. So that's quite nice. That's why I ran the card at 2 as well. A lot of decks wouldn't, because they're kind of the more combo orientated. I'm going to finish this duel instantly, but this is not this kind of deck, so I felt that was pretty neat. But you have to like spam a lot of cards on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other. You'll probably see that in my replay video if I get to upload that eventually. For the Shaddoll ratios first, 1 Hedgehog you could run 2 if you want to. If you don't want to craft Wendy, for example, 2 Shaddoll Hedgehogs are probably good, because you kind of need the effect if you want to have a card in hand for your Sheikinaga, which yeah, is kind of what you need to be doing. You can obviously send Skomata and then send Hedgehog. So a lot of the time triple Skomata and one of the other ones are fine. You could go for double Hedgehog if you want to. That's the only kind of ratio where I was like, maybe one more could be neat sometimes. Wendy at 1 is actually completely fine. Could run it at 2 if you want to. But I feel like since it's a wind monster and the wind Shaddoll is basically the worst one, yeah, the effect is nice, but I feel like at 1 it should be fine. For the next one, triple Skomata, because Skomata is a great card, can send you anything, can also send you the trap, which I'll get to in a second. 1 Dragon, very good against stuff like Skill Drain and all of these well, disruptive back row decks. Could run it at 2, especially in the Master Duel meta sometimes, can be handy, but I wouldn't recommend it. A card that you could cut if you want to run 2 dragons or 2 hedgehogs is also Shaddoll Genius. A lot of people don't really like the card, and I see why, but in this deck it kind of makes sense, because first of all, it's a machine level 4 earth monster. The level 4 doesn't really matter that much unless you decide to include some rank 4s possibly, but the machine earth matters, because with it you can actually summon Heavy Freight Train Derrick Crane from your hand. You can use it as a starter for your Infinitrack cards, which is actually quite neat, being able to normal summon this card. And a very important thing, if your opponent doesn't have an extra deck monster and you still want to go into your Sheikinaga, you can actually search Genius with the River Stormer, which is quite neat, and this is a bit of synergy, and I do like these kind of silly things. Plus the effect going second of Genius can be nice to force out some activations of your card. Sadly, it doesn't negate the effect if it's into the graveyard of the card, but it's just making it so the card can't activate its effect, which is not as good as just pure negating it, but you know how it is like. And one beast could go for 2, but I feel like 1 card for the draw is neat. Can summon it off Wendy, which, you know, getting a 2 draw and discard 1 can also come in really handy. And then 1 Shaddoll Incarnation, the trap, which you don't have to run, but since Skomata can send it, it can really help you with stuff like set one of your Shaddolls, then actually flip it over already, because Skomata was sent to the graveyard, then Skomata sends this card to the graveyard, you can instantly flip it up, get their effects, which can be neat for Beast, for Hedgehog, for Skomata, for Dragon. They're all quite neat effects if you can actually flip them up. So I feel like 1 trap card wasn't too bad, plus you can revive your Shikinaga with it, which is also actually pretty neat. So I feel like at 1 it's fine, but if you want to go for more of like a hand trap orientated build, or have a lot of more power cards, then they will do just fine in that kind of slot as well. For the rest of the Infinitracks, 1 Trencher, a lot of people play 2, and you probably can. You can switch about with the ratios a bit. Not sure if you need 2 Dairy Cranes and 2 Express Bullet Trains. You could possibly go for 1 Dairy Crane. You can search it out if you need to, so I feel like 1 could be fine. I kind of liked it at 2, but you have to see for yourself. You play about with the ratios a little bit. I'm not an Earth Machine expert deck builder. I just whipped this deck together, played a few duels, and I really liked twisting some of the things and actually coming out with a fairly competent version of the deck. I do like 2 Tunnelers though. I nearly wanted to play 3 actually, because if you're in a grind game against a lot of decks, this draw 2 and cycle cards back into the deck is coming in really handy. I definitely would play it at 2, especially in this variant. In other variants, fair enough, 1 is fine because you just want the 2 draw and then have your board already set up. But yeah, that is quite neat. Triple Brutal Dozer, the card is really good because it gets your draw 2 whatever combo started. Problematic, it does lock you into Earth Machines, which yeah, it's fine because you can even still special summon your Shikinaga because it's Machine Earth, so it doesn't hurt you too much in this kind of deck. Could be annoying for certain extra deck cards, but overall it is still quite fine. And Heavy Forward, another card that is an Infinitrack card, but you wouldn't necessarily think it because of the name. But all of their spell traps don't have Infinitrack in it, so don't know what they were going with. Maybe want to keep it more broad to be able to play in like a train deck and so on. This card mainly searches your play starter, could also search your Brutal Dozer. That's the cards you want to be searching with this. And it can give your River Stormer another material. Sometimes you want that as well. Can also change it to attack position if you want to go for a game finish once you summon it back due to its own effect by tributing a Goliath. So that is neat if I if I say so myself. 1 card that I haven't mentioned yet, Ruffian Railcar. Since you play Shaddolls and they can use cards from the deck, and you also have a way to discard a lot of cards, Railcar is actually neat because it does search you in the end phase a card to your hand, which a lot of the time, you can only do a level 10, so it will be the Express Bullet Train most of the time, or Dairy Crane if you actually have a setup for the card. I felt like it's good, you don't have to run it, but I felt like it actually came up a few times, and it did do its job. Plus, it's another level 4 Earth Machine that you can normal summon to get your Brutal Dozer combo started, which is also quite important, because if you have too many low, high level monsters in your hand, then that can be kind of bricky. What you can do is change out 1 Heavy Freight Train for another Infinitrack, which is Anchor Drill. But Anchor Drill only really does much for starting your combo or getting like a normal summon on board for the Brutal Dozer, or actually if you want to go into rank 9. And there's a lot of good rank 9s, don't get me wrong, but they are all ultra rare sadly. The Infinitrack is a super rare, but I feel like it's good going second. It can be nice if you have it or want to craft it. You can go for that kind of route, switch out 1 of these for 1 Anchor Drill because you can search it as well, so it's not too bad. And then you can do this together in combination with some of the other ones if they clog up your hand. Since you do run 6 of them, you can actually do quite a bit of shenanigans with this. Cards you want to be considering then are like True King of All Calamities, the Infinitrack Earth Slicer, there's another Mecha Phantom Beast, that card that you can go for as well. These kind of cards are what you're looking to play. For the power control kind of the part of the deck, cards you will probably have seen a lot in my deck profiles. If not, check them out. Forbidden Chalice is very good going first and going second, especially since it's only a rare card. Has helped me out of a few pickles, if I might say so myself. Winda is quite one that it's quite neat against, and all other kind of blanket negate kind of things that make you not be able to do lots of stuff. So this card pretty good. It also stops your opponent in their place, so a neat card themselves. Torrential Tribute. There's well, I wouldn't want to say synergy, but if you set a Shaddoll and then Torrential Tribute, you do get its effect. So you know, sometimes that's helpful if you're looking for a specific card, or if you want to pop something with Dragon or send something with Skomata. That can be quite nice. It did come up a few times, so I felt that was neat. Plus it can shut down, like you're looking for cards that can really shut down your opponent's turns for good, and I think Torrential Tribute is one of these cards if you time it right. Another card, Dynamiscus, not only because it's a good trap card, but it has two things that are very helpful with the Shaddoll package, which first of all, it does trigger your Shaddoll cards since it doesn't send for cost, which is really important. So if you have like a Shaddoll in your hand that's really clogging you up, then you can send that to the graveyard and then get the effect of that Shaddoll card, which is great. Also, you target banish a card is quite neat. And the second effect, since you do play quite a few traps, it can special summon itself, and then it's a water monster. So if you ever feel like you're playing against a ritual deck possibly, then making the water Shaddoll isn't the worst thing you can do, because neither player can special summon monsters from the hand or graveyard using spell trap effects. So in theory, it's a lot of effort to set up, but it would work. Also, yeah, I don't know. It's quite a neat thing. You can run the water Shaddoll as well if you want to, but I felt like it came in. It's not as handy as if you play with Construct, because you don't get the whole combo off that you can otherwise do with the trap card and Construct. You can play the water Shaddoll if you like to, not just the fusion but also the main deck monster. But if you don't want to go for any of these combos, you can cut them from extra deck as well. Lost Wind, great card to stop your opponent, sets itself back, neat. Solemn Judgment, most people have this card already because they bought these packs, so I feel like I include it without counting it as an ultra rare, but you can easily swap that out with any other card that you like. Now a bit into cards that you can run, but I didn't run because they're either not budget or I don't quite wanted to go that route. Card Pot of Prosperity is probably the only pot you can play in this deck, because you can at least decide what extra deck cards you banish, and some of them you might know you don't want to go into them, but then you can draw cards and stuff, and it kind of conflicts with the deck, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Foolish Burial works good with like Shaddoll kind of stuff, and sometimes helps you get the last Earth Machine monster into the graveyard. It's not perfect, but it's a card that you can play. Maxi, strong card in general. Is a bit annoying because this deck doesn't run hand traps. It's better if you run other hand traps with Maxi, because then you can obviously draw into them if your opponent goes off, because your opponent like does whatever kind of Exodia combo and whatnot, so FTKs, then just pop and Maxi might not be enough if they actually take the challenge, because then you actually have to draw into a card that helps you during their turn. So bit iffy on that one. Ash Blossom, obviously a card you can run. It's a great card. Then the Machina package, Machina, whatever you want to call it, it's quite neat, but it obviously shapes the deck differently, and then the whole Shaddoll package should be probably reduced to at least maybe only like 2-3 Shaddolls plus the fusion, for example. If you even still want to run it, obviously you can cut that whole engine if you want to. That plus Metal Cruncher plus Fortress plus Citadel. Citadel is a card you can run at 1 in this deck as well, because if you get it to the graveyard, which you easily can with River Stormer, with Shaddoll Fusion, then popping stuff with Torrential Tribute, for example. That's quite neat, because this card special summons itself when one of your face-up Earth Machine monsters is destroyed by battle card effect, so that's quite nice. It can pop your whole opponent's board, which is also quite nice, and it keeps coming back, I feel like that's a card that you can easily include. Another card that's amazing actually is Urgent Schedule. I didn't want to include it because of the whole Shaddoll package and whatnot, but you can easily swap out the Shaddoll Fusion, the Shaddoll cards for like Machina, whatever package, and Urgent Schedule, because this generates you a lot of advantage going second though, and that's why I didn't want to include it, because this version is technically more going first with some hints of going second. Other cards that I want to talk about are like rank 10s. Obviously the Trains, they have good rank 10 cards. Super Dora is probably what I'd be looking at with this kind of deck, because you can use it, also use it together with like Derek Train, which is quite neat. You don't want to push for game that much, but yeah, the Rail Cannon and the other ones, they're fine. if you want to run them. What you can do actually, 2 level 12 monsters sounds weird, but you can actually pull it off by having your Harvester and Dairy Crane or the Bullet Train, for example. That's why I kind of like running them at the ratio they are, is you can go into a rank 12, which is so incredibly funny if you then go into Zeus, because you don't even have to attack. Even if you have to attack, you have enough Xyz monsters, so Zeus in this deck would still be fine anyway, most of the time. Since it's not an Earth Machine monster though, you have to really watch out, because if you would go into Brutal Dozer, then you couldn't summon it anymore. So a bit of a different one. You can see in the extra deck there is a combo with the rank 10s, which is you can go into either number 35, then put number 77 on top of it by its effect. Not as good as if you actually go into number 77 during your opponent, well, not during your opponent's turn, but if you go second with the Infinitrack Harvester combo plus the Bullet Train or Dairy Crane, and you can banish all of your opponent's special summoned monsters, which that's insane. Like, it's non-targeting, non-destruction removal, really good, 4000 attack. What else is there to say? Also, what you can do is put another card in between. Number 84 could be put onto number 35, and then you can still go into number 77 after. It kind of nukes your opponent's board, and you don't have to wait if you go into the number 35 and then go into number 77. 77 can't be used that turn, but number 84 can be used, but you can pop all your opponent's monsters that have basically 2200 defense or less, which, yeah, it's okay, but already doesn't get rid of link monsters. And yeah, if you want to include it and you want to cut one of the cards, then that's a neat addition for a budget option. Talking about the extra deck, I ran one Wendigo because you could technically go into it, but you don't really want to go into it. So if you want to cut a card, that's probably the card you want to be cutting. Could run this, could cut this, can be neat sometimes, probably not. Shikinaga, neat. You could also substitute these two, but play actual Shaddoll cards that are actually good. Abkalone and Winda would fit quite well into this deck. Shikinaga at 2 is neat. You can also recycle it with Tunneler, which is quite nice, so you shouldn't be running out of them ever. River Stormer, really good card, would definitely run it. What you can run is the Master of Blades. It's not the perfect rank 7, but it's a budget rank 7, and if you ever have like a Harvester and one of the level 5s on board, you can go into this card if you didn't activate the effect of Brutal Dozer and you just have them on board for some reason, because you tribute Shikinaga because you can summon it back with Incarnation and then summon Tunneler from your hand or something. Then you could, with Harvester, go into the Master of Blades. Same thing for Mountain Smasher. It's a card, it's not great, the effect is basically terrible, but what are you going to do? Skyplace Gangaridai, a card I crafted, but you don't have to. It basically never really comes up, but it could with the trains, and then you can pop 2 cards, and it's nice, and you do 1000 damage to your opponent. It wouldn't craft it just because of that reason, but I felt like it's a nice inclusion. Definitely a 3 Goliath. The card is amazing for getting machines into your graveyard. You can summon it multiple times a turn. Don't forget about that, very important. Don't have to run Construct, but if you ever get Construct on board because you send Wendy in your opponent's end step somehow, and then normal summon another Shaddoll from your hand, then you have 2 flip monsters on board, use the effect, go into Construct, and then you can use it to actually get rid of your Shaddolls in your hand and use it to fusion summon over and over again, which is quite neat. But to get to that point, it's not that easy, so you could cut that as well. And Double-Headed Anger Knuckle, a card that helps you recycle certain cards, helps you start certain combos. It's a link 2, sadly cannot be used for link material, but it is still quite nice. Sadly doesn't trigger Shaddoll effects. That would be really premium if this wasn't for cost, but it's actually for cost, both of their effects. So it still helps you if you have Shaddolls in your hand, you don't know what to do with them. Doesn't matter, just discard them. But yeah, it's a nice card. You could go for the Ancient Gear link 2, and then there's like loads of combos you can do with Ancient Gear box if you want to look that up. It's quite like a combo-y kind of thing, and you can pop certain things and then reduce your opponent's monster to 0 attack and so on. Get Gear Town if you're really into these kind of things. There's so much to do that you can do with Infinitrack, so you can mix them with Ancient Gears as well. If that's one of your kind of things to do, then feel free to, but I felt like this card, because it's a rare, was a better inclusion in the deck in general.